75% of their time in school or outside of the home, right? Which obviously minimizes the impact of parents and family. And then another 10% of that time is probably spent on social media. The impact is coming from, the pressures are coming from outside. So much more, I think, than even before. Whereas for me, yes, I would go to school, and yes, I would deal with bullying in terms of like what I was wearing, or, you know, I don't even know, just like silly things. But now the pressure for being cool, for having a million likes,
being straight,
I mean, there's just so much more pressure. I don't even know if I could withstand the amount of pressure that these kids are dealing with now. I feel like, in a sense, social media has created that for a lot of kids. Whereas before, we can go home and then we have our families and we're good and we kind of escape that, and then we can get rejuvenated to deal with it the next day.
Program.
They deal with these people on social media, and they are dragging their names through the mud. They can't escape it. It's like they get home and they're still checking on their phone to see what's being said.
How important it is to have people here who have really who can discuss the ins and out and talk about suicide and suicide prevention. I have my friend Kyle here today, and I have my friend Natasia here today, and like, first of all, you guys are strong as hell. To be here and to be willing to share some experiences. So when you think of the word suicide, what comes to mind for you guys?
When I think of suicide, from my personal experience, it makes me emotional. Because I know from my own experience how the dark place that you have to be in to actually not want to be here anymore. The experience of feeling like just everything is just unbearable, like tired. Like I remember when I was going through my depression, and it transitioned into feeling suicidal, it was just constant feeling of tired. Like I'm just tired. And I remember that was my word in therapy, on the phone with people, I'm just tired. And I was doing a lot, like working full time. I was a foster mother in church. I'm doing girls ministry and choir. So I mean, I'm doing things, and I know earlier you mentioned about feeling like you have purpose. And I was doing everything, a lot of things that people would have found a lot of purpose in, and I still felt empty. And it was just, you go about the day, you're doing everything that you know you have to do, but at the end of the day,
you're just
doors
existing,
closed when nobody's there. It's just like tears, just falling. So when I think of, when I hear suicide, it's just that despair, that sense of hopelessness.
As a suicide attempt survivor, what would you say to people who are feeling positive what you're feeling or what you've been through? Sorry.
I would say you owe it to yourself to see your lived experience played out in another way. You also owe it to yourself to edify your dignity. And that takes time. That takes time. Only thing that's really sure about life is we live it and then we transpire. We transition. We leave this earth. If you're considering it, consider all of what you don't know, because all of the result of what you are now is a sum of what you thought you knew, and you're learning that you really don't, and you're learning again. So consider time. That's what I would say. Consider that things truly can change. I'm not even going to say get better. I'm going to say can change, because it's completely relative to the individual. But just as a person with a lived experience, as a human being amongst the collective, think of what could happen. That's what I got to a point where enough was enough. And I'm a very logical individual. So for me, suicide was extremely logical. It really wasn't emotion-based at that point. Robbie is talking about an instance where last year in the summer, we were working for the same company, and I had got completely activated, activated to the point where I knew without a shadow of a doubt, after years of trauma, that was my last day. And there was nobody going to stop me. And that's just what it was. But something about the reality and the presence of intimate death, the body and the mind and the spirit kicks in somehow. And I told someone immediately. I actually told a manager at the time. And long story short, got all the way to the hospital, ended up staying at a respite. New York has this great and wonderful medical model, outside the realms of the medical model, opportunity of going to a respite, which is literally what a respite means. You go to rest, you go to recharge, you go to gather resources, and you go to unplug from life. And I did that, but just, I guess, getting back to the point of why I got to that point, trauma. I mean, trauma is ever relative, and there's no one direct trauma. Everybody's trauma is completely personal and relative to them. So there's no one set thing that happens. I think one of the biggest things that would activate, I say activate because I'm big on language. So even though trigger is popular here, Janae, go.
So my experience was a bit different from Kyle's because I actually overdosed. Like I did actually go through with the attempts. Obviously, I didn't succeed on the act. But I just wanted to clarify something because I noticed, like, even with the discussion, when we say depression and suicide, it's like they overlap. And I just wanted to just make it clear that you can be depressed and not suicidal. You can, at one point, be suicidal and no longer be suicidal, but still deal with depression. So I just kind of want to make that, because my suicide attempt was in 2012. I have not been suicidal since. However, the depressive states come and go.
Right.
So that I still deal with, but I have not been suicidal. Like, it's not even about making excuses when I'm feeling it, but I have to acknowledge what I'm feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Self-awareness.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, I feel it happening. So what do I need to do to try to offset it or get through it? Because you can't always stop it. Sometimes you just gotta ride the wave. And one of the posts that I have on the Instagram page is like, the episodes come and go like the tides. You just have to learn how to ride the waves to keep from drowning. Because that's what it is.
That's what it is. I mean, I can piggyback off that. Suicidal ideation, mental health has been a life experience. That teaser. It's been a life experience for me from childhood. That actually wasn't my. It got to a point, picking back off of my suicidal attempt and ideation that Robbie saw. It became conscious because it was a pattern for me. It became a go-to for me. It became something that was it was like a cousin. Suicide, death in general.
I just want to run.
Just mental health from trauma. It just became something that became a logical choice, and
that became your comfort.
It became my comfort because I idealize the peace in finality. But as you learn to figure out that there are other makings into what that means for you, and while you get to the point of suicide, you start to decode what mental health issues, what mental health experiences you are, what you're dealing with. Mental health in itself, it gets overlapped very frequently. As we talk about what suicide is, the dignity in suicide, because there is dignity for some people, for some experiences, i.e. people who have chronic illnesses, medical diagnoses that are just not going to change. And they rather have control over all aspects of their life, even in the final moment. And that's very important. Associated with that is the language that we put with suicide. The word commit is being looked at as becoming almost dangerous because, people commit burglary. People commit crimes, people commit murder. Somebody going through or transitioning by suicide is a completely different experience. It's at the end of the day, it was and still is somebody's life, and that's very important. Activating, we're not encouraging it. I'm not encouraging it, but there is absolute dignity in understanding that you've gotten to a point where you feel like you want to stop. And this is where it becomes, for me, hey Black community, for me, this is a big issue when it comes to people of color,
Right.
because of our literal DNA predisposition trauma. We are taught to be strong no matter what. So to access various forms of support, it's like, for what? I can just get over it.
Right.
Or, you being crazy, or all these negative connotations that is associated with mental health.
Sidebar, to piggyback on that, I think that people think it's easier
Yeah.
to just do that rather than to dig through your trauma. And I think personally for me, there was peace in digging through my trauma and figuring out what I'm going through rather than just like, let's just call it quits because it's easy.
Underlines when you're dealing with somebody who's going through trauma, going through a life transition, not only are they absolutely impacted by the positive intent you're trying to share, you are holding space responsibly. That's very important. That's how you start to turn the tide for a lot of people. A lot of people's trauma, we get to sit with it, and it creates veins, and it creates branches, and then we have to deal with life, and then we get older, and then all these other factors, and we're
Not getting to the root.
not getting to the
right.
root, and then before we know it, we're 26, but really we're the 13-year-old with trauma.
Jesus.
So that's very important.
And I never forget what my father said. I always looked at you as a strong one. Like, you go to church and you do this and you that. I always talk to you about everything, and I'm like, it got to the point where I resented the whole strong. I don't want to be the strong one anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be looked at the strong one. I don't want to be the one that everybody can come to and
It's
don't
a weight
feel
to
like
carry. Yeah.
that they need to check on me. See, that's the thing. It's okay to be the strong one, but you got to understand that person needs somebody
help,
too.
too.
The
Right.
healers
Who's
need
strong
healers.
for the
Right.
strong one?
Who's
Right.
strong for the strong? People associate that. It's like you become strong by way of the trauma you survived.
Right.
And it's a disconnection, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm a human being that still needs enrichment and edification. I'm a human being that still needs to be healed. I need the space to be healed. I need the community to assist. And when you have to facilitate that for yourself, there is that experience of resentment, because it's like, wait a minute, but I'm human, and I can have a bad day or a bad week.
I feel these feelings.
I feel these
and
feelings.
It's okay. Yep.
Like, you need to create. Like, I would like for you to create a space for me to have the openness and the freedom to be like, you know what, this week just ain't it, and this is why.
Right.
So when my strength is cloaked, there's purpose behind that. It's not just all shiny. It's not just counterfeit.
Kept going, and we just had to bring everybody on board. As you can see, the couch is really full. You had a question, I think, that you were asking before we started recording.
So I think the statistics now indicate that about 79% of suicide attempts are made by males. What do you guys think about that statistic?
Go for it.
Why do you think that is?
I think males have a huge pride thing. Women are very tapped into their vulnerability.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really like a huge feminist, because I can tap into that. Men, they don't want to talk about it. You gotta be tough, you gotta be rough, don't cry, don't feel.
They're not encouraged. Yeah, I think that's how you're raised too.
Right.
I also think it's because when you think of suicide, you want to take the easy way out.
Right,
And
that's
the
what-
easy way out is usually painful, and it leaves you scarred.
Right, not digging through the
Women-
trauma.
Like when women commit suicide, we don't, jump off buildings or put a bullet in our head.
Very
We
true.
take pills.
The verbiage, I'm going to defer to you.
Whatever.
Right?
That's right.
Transitioning seems like a better option than crying.
Yeah.
Like,
How
huh?
does that make sense?
How?
Does that make sense?
How sway America?
Yeah.
A world? How? Like, how is that more acceptable? I don't know. I feel like we need to do a better job of creating those safe spaces from a younger age in homes And that comes from these conversations
Right.
where we're normalizing the fact that you can struggle, you can be depressed, you can have a tough day. It's
Yeah.
okay to express your emotions. It's okay to talk about it. It's okay to even feel. I think there is even a stigma in feeling bad.
Right.
At home. I get that the children are in school most of their lives, but if we start to have these discussions at home early, allow our children to be safe, to feel safe, to come home and talk to us, then they
Yeah.
won't have to go out there and talk to other people or to search out other ways. But if they don't feel comfortable at home, what else are they gonna do?
Right.
And then if they go out to the world and they don't feel comfortable there, then what's left? I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think suicide prevention really starts with making sure that people are tethered by a community, and that creates environments and opportunities to see somebody's intended end. It's a collective. Like, we are all interconnected, and even those of us who really don't have anybody, so to speak, there is still a interweaving of purpose somewhere,
Yeah.
that will only be seen by your curiosity to see what the end is going to be. And sometimes that's all it takes. NYC, from what I know of, NYC has created this opportunity for people who are experiencing extreme trauma, ongoing mental health issues, etc. They facilitate something called a respite. The word respite literally means a place to go to rest. And you access a respite, i.e. by going to the hospital, explaining that you are experiencing suicidal ideation, or you just feel like you're going to be a harm to yourself or others. It's a great option. Also, if you have any psychologists or any psychiatrists that are available to you, they're always, pretty much that option is always supposed to be present. It is a wonderful opportunity for everybody who just needs to unplug and plug back in. Because, if you're at that point, sometimes it could really just save your life. It's a turning point.
Backing off the respite, they do have respite for youth up until the age of 21 who are also dealing with mental health issues or diagnosed with mental illness. They actually have a center on Bergen Avenue, New York City Children's Center. Usually they need a referral through a therapist. Hence, take your child to a therapist if you see any signs of concern, any major changes in behavior. Don't try to figure it out on your own. You can also call mobile crisis. You can get the number from NewYorkCity.gov as well, or 311. Mobile crisis will send a team to the home to assess you, your child, or your loved one, whoever is experiencing some mental health concerns and you're not sure what to do.
And are you housed in the hospital?
So you're not housed in the hospital.
Okay.
They have various sites across the boroughs,
Okay.
and that they that they pretty much open to the people who need it. It's like single room occupancies.
Okay.
And you stay there for a week. It's pretty
Okay.
much like a week minimum.
Okay.
And there are people on staff, which is the greatest part that I love. Shout out to HTH. It's a program that I'm a part of called Howie the Heart. People with lived experiences being introduced back into society and using their lived experiences to lived work. And the people on staff all have mental health backgrounds. There's nobody on that staff inside of the respite doesn't have a mental health. So it's like people who really understand it.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
And people
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think outside of that, I think you want to start talking to people in your circle.
Yes.
What I'm learning personally is that love has no fear. So you really need to just start talking and opening up to people and letting them know, like, hey, this is how I feel today, and going from there.
And if you don't feel that if you feel you cannot talk to the people in your circle, then find a new tribe.
Right.
Because you should be able to feel comfortable
Oh, God.
enough to share how you're feeling and not be judged
Absolutely.
or made to feel worse about whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was absolutely amazing. A lot of tears, laughter, and just living life. And that's what this episode is about. We want to encourage everyone to continue living their life.
I have a question for I think both of you are active in helping others who maybe have maybe experiencing something that you have already experienced. How helpful has that been in your own experience? Like helping others, how has that helped you continue to overcome? Because it's not like a one
This
shot.
is like,
I want to go.
go ahead.
Pick me.
Y'all,
Okay.
it's life changing.
Absolutely.
I really feel like Jesus. I feel like I'm a living testimony of what happens when you just go to sleep and see what else the other day is going to give. Because I'm at that point now where I'm literally on the precipice of my life being completely changed, and the suicidal ideation led me to this point. I'm about to graduate from a program that is going to use me via Columbia University to work inpatient with people that have lived experience with mental health, and I'm going to be meeting people in the throes of, at that final moment. And I would not have authenticity if I didn't go through it.
Oh my gosh.
I would not be credible if that wasn't a part of my story. Like
Right.
there would be no way I would be a part of that program if I didn't have a lived experience. So to have to turn the page to get to this point is amazing. I just it's piggybacking off of purpose. Like if you just kind of kick down the door one more day, you never know.
It's life changing.
Yeah.
I almost feel like helping
Yeah.
other people save their lives saves my life.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you
Absolutely.
say, turn the page.
Yeah.
Turn the page. Turn the page.
You have to,
Yes.
you have to
Yeah.
know, you have to acknowledge
Yes.
that whatever
Semicolon.
you're feeling in this moment is not
Semicolon.
the end.
I'm like,
It's not
Yeah.
that-
Like this is not the end.
Yeah.
not.
Whatever it is that you're feeling,
Yeah.
it will get better and it can get better. But I also think that suicide prevention starts from acknowledging depression. And I think that if we don't acknowledge depression within ourselves and in our loved ones, and we don't take it seriously, then that's where the suicidal ideation and the feeling of emptiness and loneliness comes in, because we feel like we don't have anyone.
Right. Right.
to take it a little further, I'm sorry, with acknowledging the depression, you have to acknowledge there's trauma somewhere. So
Right.
it either makes you dig deeper.
You gotta go back.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't want to do. They don't want to dig deep. They don't really want to do the work in a sense.
Yeah.
To not to say it like that.
I don't think it's they don't want to do the work, but like you said,
It's
sometimes
scary.
you
Right.
stated, you okay with feeling, the emotions with dealing with the trauma. Some people are not. Like, because you gotta
Right.
relive, not uncapable, it's uncomfortable. And so to keep bringing up that pain that you don't want to touch makes you kind of fall back.
Right.
Yeah.
Also,
Thank
it's
you for your correction
it's
on
a
that.
process.
Right.
Yeah.
It is a process. It's a monumental
Yep.
process.
Yeah.
You just didn't wake up one day and you was depressed. Like, child, this has been happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it usually stem from trauma. And also hashtag normalize
Oh my
mental
gosh.
health,
Yes.
mental health awareness. Hashtag normalize what that means for all communities. Like, this is a world issue. Like, facilitate safe spaces,
Yes.
tribe-wise, community-wise, where mental health awareness is as easy as drinking water. Like, it needs to be that readily available.
Yeah. And even in our healthcare communities, I would love for people that have any contact and access to people in the healthcare community to pay attention to things like, if people are coming to you and saying, look, I'm exhausted all the
Yes.
time,
My chest.
or my
chest
chest,
pain,
I'm having chest pain, and
palpitations.
it's sort of like these symptomatic physical symptoms that are not really attributed to a disorder or disease or something that's really you can diagnose as a physical ailment. But pay attention, be alert, like let that be on your radar as a clinician of any sort. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be coming in for that. If I'm going to my GYN and I'm telling her that I'm exhausted, just because it has nothing to do with why this patient is there doesn't mean that you shouldn't take note and make a recommendation for that patient to maybe go somewhere else or see this person or whatever it is. Just how are you doing?
Right.
What's going on?
Yeah.
That could be the last word. I don't
So
know.
I know this episode was very layered. It was very deep. I just want to say that if you don't want to reach out to any of the places and resources that we've mentioned, feel free. Our Instagrams are right below. Contact us, DM us. We're here to support you. We're here to uplift you, and we're here to save lives and more survivors, less victims.
Is that a sermon?
Come on.
Bye,
Bye, y'all.
I'm like, you don't incorporate